You know what's better than a 1 hour rambling video? Well, this is GGHL, so of course it's gotta be a good old fashioned TLS. I'm gonna go sim for sim if this idea catches on and sort of place where I think teams are. Obviously, this will change based on how they keep playing in sims and how I think they're doing in performances. So, these are the teams that have really caught my eye so far this season. And just during the season, I think will be at the cup level. Playoff level, I think they'll be in the playoffs. 8th seed, kind of self-explanatory. Wild card, watch out for them. Their performances could suggest that they are doing worse than they actually are. Do exist, that's just for teams that haven't really got anything noticeable to talk about. Overperforming, well, I'll put some of the teams that I think have massively overperformed in comparison to how they've actually played. Underperforming is the opposite, where they caught. So the wild card will be like teams who could be there. Overperforming will be teams who, you know, they've done better than they've played, and underperforming will be vice versa. And then just, the Columbus Blue Jackets, you know, you're so good you get a tier of your own. Right, where would I place Anaheim? Right, obviously, on a .8 PCT. They got 21 goals for in 6 games and 16 goals against with a 41% power play. And you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, shit, this team might be amazing. You're clearly a shit GM. But no, they've not been good in the slightest. They played the Edmonton Oilers. It was a flat game and they won 3-1 due to penalty power plays. They then lost to them in a shootout. Yes, a 5-3 win against the Yotes was nice, but they were absolutely beaten to shit and had no right winning this game. Then they lost in overtime to the Sharks. And yes, they beat the Hawks. But, I mean, it's the Hawks. They're not that good of a team. And then they travel, then they host a out-of-form LA, who just haven't got going. And again, their power play really did save them. Like, if I bring up this statistic that kind of shows you just how bad they've been. So they have scored 5 goals on the power play, which is a grand total of about a fifth of their goals. So, let me just change that. So yeah, actually, I don't need to explain that, but yeah, I will put Anaheim right now. They are in the overperforming category. I can't really rank them in any of these right now because I just don't think we've seen enough from the Ducks to know where they really are. They've been playing weak competition and they haven't been playing great, but they're somehow doing well. So they're in the overperforming category now. I expect the Ducks to kind of slide off and even out in the next 15 to 20 games of the season. They are just overperforming compared to how they've actually done. The Arizona Coyotes are a team that are always hard to rank because they always have talent, they always have good players, and they always have the ability to kill a game off in a second. But every year they just seem to put something wrong. The start of the season bashing Vancouver, they were outclassed in the game, stole a win away from the Canucks. Good win for them, but not a great performance when you actually look at it in detail. They then lost to the Ducks, and as we explained, they should have won that game comfortably. Then they played Calgary. That was a much better game. Their power play was bad, but they put up a solid penalty kill. Wasn't great with the ball plays, but the face-offs was nice. And to be fair, yeah, they won a better team than the Flames. Wild next. Wild, another good team, but the Oats made hard work of it. They found themselves 1-0 down inside 12 seconds, but they came back to win the game 4-2. So another flat performance there. And then their last in this 4-1 at home games was against my Blues. They did very well. They killed 4 power plays, so penalty kill looks to be a big asset of the Oats this season. They played well. They won that. Where would I put the Oats right now? I don't think they're cup level right now. Playoff level, with what I've seen, being outclassed by the Canucks, losing to the Ducks in unfortunate circumstances. But I think the 2 games that suggest to me that the Oats are going to be quite good this year is the 2 good wins against the Flames and the Blues. Yes, it's an out-of-form Flames, but it's still the Flames, and obviously the Blues are a solid side. The Wild game was hard work, and that's the sort of thing that keeps worrying me with the Oats. Like, they've had good performances sprinkled in with some inconsistent messes. So I think for that, I'll put them in playoff level, sort of lower tier. Right now, I think as the consistency gets there, and this next season will be big on the road of playing against the likes of the Jets, the Preds, 2 teams who have been pretty good at the start of the season, and then they go on the way to St. Louis as well to play that game again. Next sim will reveal a lot about whether or not I think the Yotes are going to be a deep cup running team, based on how they played at the start of the season, or if I think they're going to slide off a cliff. Boston, right. Boston are currently 7th in the East. Igor Shesterkin is still playing. Now, they started the season playing against the Avs. I made my thoughts on this game pretty clear. It was a nothing game. Bruins couldn't take advantage of the power play. They came back from 3-0 down to obviously get the shootout win. It was a nice performance, especially given they were up against like the cup favourites. So to win that on the opening day of the season was nice. The Habs were a team who have improved a lot this year, but the Bruins made fairly light work of them. 2 out of 4 power plays. One thing I'll notice about the Bruins as well is they came back again. Their first 2 games of the season, they went 5-0 down and won both games. So, yeah, Boston seems to be doing the Florida Panthers 2021-22 strat, where they'll just give you a 3-0 lead and win anyway. Then they came back home to play Tampa. Thankfully, they were the one going 2-0 up this time. Fairly easy game for Boston. This 5-2 win against a Tampa team, which, you know, they have talent, but they're not one of the bigger teams in the East. Nice game here for Kunin and Cousins. So, fairly easy home game that. Then obviously travelled on the road, heading all the way out west in a short space of time against the Wild. Found themselves 1-0 down, but again, this Boston Bruins team got on the power play, dominated the tie in the end. Like, those were 2 very good results to have, you know, beating a solid Tampa team and a not great Wild team, but to travel on the road all the way out west, you know, they really only had a couple of hours west building up to that game, and they won 5-2 with minimal fuss. And then Calgary, they lost badly, but this was not a game that they will want to remember. The power play, which had been their biggest asset, like the entire first bit, was not great. The Flames had an empty netter, which made it a lot further out than it should have been. And this was just quite simply a game where Olivier Lopez summoned his inner Andrei Vasilevsky and refused to let the puck pass him. So where would I rank this? I think they're definitely better than the Yotes. Do I place them in cup level off the start? No. They weren't they beat the Abs, but I'm not going to place them in cup level for nice wins against the Wild and the Tampa. That's kind of the results I would expect a playoff level team like Boston to get. The wins against the Canadians and the Abs were nice, but then they lose on the road 6-3 to an out of 4 Flames. So for now, I can only put them in playoff level, but I do think they've had a much better start to this season than the Yotes. I am tempted to put them lower cup level, but I think the inability to do much against an actually solid team like the Flames just really ruined it for me. Next up, we have the Buffalo Sabres. Cup level. I don't want to get banned, so you're going in cup level. Right, Calgary Flames. Where are we putting the Calgary Flames? So, they've had a rough start to the season. They were awful. They started out the season fine. Like, they went 2-0 up inside 3 minutes against the Sharks. And then they just imploded. Like, their penalty kill was nice, but they didn't score a power play against one of the worst teams in the league. And it was a bad game. And then they had to travel back home into Canada to face them against the Islanders. And again, they were up 2-1 inside 6 minutes. Sheffield had 2. Everything was going great. Then the Islanders equalised, but it's fine. 16 seconds into the third, and it's Austin Matthews with the goal. But the Flames were terrible. They only killed 2 out of the 4 Islanders power plays, and they ended up boarding a 3-2 lead. So it was a really rough start to the season, but it's fine. They're on the road, and they've had a nice couple of days preparing Glendale to face off against the Yotes. And then they were absolutely taken apart by the Yotes, as I mentioned, in a 4-2 win for the Yotes. And then the next day they had to come all the way back to Calgary to face off against my Blues in a game where, I mean, the Blues weren't great. I mean, the Calgary Flames penalty kill was solid, but they didn't pose too much of a threat, and the Blues were able to easily get the win. So at this point, they have been awful. Like, they haven't been playing well in defeat. Their win against Boston was a big turning point, but they needed to show it against the Caps, which, in my opinion, they really didn't. They weren't as physical as I would have liked. They had to get a late-minute equaliser against one of the weaker teams in the East, and they barely outshot them. So, honestly, I wouldn't put them in under Hawking because they haven't been playing well. You know what? Of what I've seen from the Flames at the start of the season, 8th seed. I'm serious. 8th seed. They've had one good game, and that was against the Bruins. Everything else has been a big part of steaming dog shit. Flames are an 8th seed team if they keep up with these performances. The next thing will be key, though. They've got an easy win against the Blue Jackets and the Sens, hopefully. And then they've got 2 tough games on the road against both the Maple Leafs and the Bruins. Like, if they can get, wins against both Maple Leafs and Bruins, I'll push them into playoff level. But I haven't seen enough from their performances to suggest that they're anything more than an 8th seed team. Moving on to the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, the Carolina Hurricanes going for their very interesting strat. They had a nice easy start to the season, back-to-back games against Dallas. The first game, they weren't great, but hey, they got the win. But it's early days. They're trying a new system. We'll see what happens with them. Then they go on the road to Dallas. This was a much better game for them. They dominated the play. They didn't really allow the Dallas to do anything. And yeah, this is kind of what you would expect playing against a team like Dallas. You know, shake off the first game fast and then improve, learn your opposition and battle them. But the Avs game as well, I think the Canes showed how much of a threat they are. 4-0, although you could argue this was lucky with the pad goaltending from Colorado. They probably could have done 1-0, but it was a nothing game. The 4-0 win flatters them. But it was an okay performance. They then played the Jets, who have been the best team at the start of the league. They were outclassed. Like, the Jets just had their measure. Torres danced around their defense like it was nothing. Then they played the Canucks. Not a good team, but they, again, did kind of what they did to Dallas, where, you know, they just took them apart. Wasn't as good on the finishing as we would have liked. This was a game where GGHL actually figured out what stopping a puck is. He put up a .933 here. So yeah, that was nice. Then they go on the road to the Pens, who hadn't been as great as the start of the season as they would have liked, and again, didn't do anything. They were 0 for 3 on the power play. That's kind of been the concern I have for the Canes. Like, their power play has been non-existent. 20% might seem impressive, but when you look at when they've actually played good teams like the Avs, the Pens and the Jets, like, those are the 3 teams I'm going to use for this metric. They went 1 for 2 against the Avs, which is fine. The Avs also had bad goaltending that day. They went 0 for 2 against the Jets, and against the Pens, they went 0 for 3. So that is a combined 1 for 6 power plays against actually good teams. So I'll be interested to see how the power play shakes up against Boston and Oilers. Where would I think they go? Well, they clearly showed against both the Avs and the Jets that they can sort of go toe-to-toe with a decent team. The Pens, not so much on the road, but they were on the road. Do I think they cut though? No. I think they had a worse start to the season than the Yotes, but I still think they're a playoff level team. Like, they scored 3 goals against the Jets. Like, they're a solid side. Like, if they can just fix that power play, they're going to be so much better. Because if they get a goal when they can, all of a sudden that changes the whole dynamic of the Pittsburgh game. Next up, Chicago. New GM, of course. Good luck, Furry. Our battle for worst GM in the league will be legendary. So, yeah, I don't think I have anything really to say about the Hawks, do I? Their ranking should be fairly self-explanatory. They exist. There's nothing else to say. They are a team that exists. They might win a game or two here and there, but they're mainly tanking. There's not really too much to add there. The Avs. Okay, this could get controversial. So the Avs start the season playing on the road. Their first 4 games were actually on the road. They went 3-1, bottled it against Boston, and they were not good. But they killed the penalty kill nice, so I'll give them points for that. They then travelled to the Caps, who we already saw were a bit of a banana peel, if you recall earlier, for Calgary. They were okay. They were, again, not great, but they drew the game and won in a shootout. They haven't done anything impressive. They then got slapped up by the Canes. It was just an off day. Columbus Blue Jackets, I refuse to acknowledge that game. They then played up against Edmonton, were 4-1 down, somehow came back to win this game, even though they were once again outshot, but the clinical finishing was there. That's what you need. They also had a nice fighting spirit. But then they played the Hawks in a 4-3. They battered them, but they couldn't they couldn't take advantage of their power plays as often as they would have liked, and it was all kind of flat. Like, the penalty kill was nice, power plays there, I guess. But the real concern for me is they've gone to an overtime or shootout in 4 of their first 6 games. And, you know, they've gone to shootouts against guys like Caps, Oilers, and Hawks. Like, guys you'd expect a cup predicted team like the Avs to win. Like, do I think they're bad? No. But from what I've seen at the start of the season, like, they're not... I'm always tempted to put them in overperforming based off their performances, but I know the quality the Avs have. I think their quality means they've had a better start to the season than the Hawks, Canes, so I'll put them in playoff level. Do I? I am tempted to drop them below. I'm going to drop them below the Canes. I think that might be controversial, but I'm going to do it, and hopefully Osos don't ban me. Next up, we have Dallas. Now, Dallas... Yeah, their ranking is going to be fairly self-explanatory, but they managed to beat the Pens, so I give them a better ranking than the Hawks. Next up, we've got Detroit. Detroit could literally be anything. Like, they could win the cup this year and it wouldn't bat an eyelid. Do I think they're good? No. Again, their ranking should be fairly self-explanatory. I'm going to put them below Dallas. Dallas beat the Pens, they're good. Okay, I wasn't the only one who thought Edmonton Oilers would fall off a cliff this season, right? So they started out the season losing to the Ducks. It was a brutal game if you were a fucking Oilers fan. Watching your team go from winning the cup to that shit show. And then they went 3-1 up against the Ducks and drew the game and won it in a shootout, even though they were a far better team. The Ducks just had really good goaltending with Bittersberger. And yeah, they beat a weak Hawks team. They weren't impressive, but Levis got 3 goals and South was insane as well. They then lost in overtime to the Owls. We mentioned that game. That was a close game, so that was an okay performance. They made solidly light work against a weakened LA team who just haven't fired this season. They won that at home. And then they played the Rangers. Levis put them 2-0 up, but the Rangers fought back. And even though they killed 3 power plays, they couldn't really do anything. So yeah, overall disappointing games for Edmonton. Would I say they've underperformed? I mean, not really. I'd sort of just put Edmonton in the wild card category for now. Like, they've clearly showed against, like, the Avs. Even saw it against guys like Ducks, Hawks, and LA. Not great teams, but they showed their quality. Like, I'll put them in wild card. They could be anything. Especially if the team is still fighting against Pete, having lost a lot of key players. Next in, they're going to face weak sides like Detroit and Columbus Blue Jackets, and then fair enough, tough away game at the Canes. So that will probably tell me more if Edmonton are just kind of a team that exists or an actual playoff level team. Next up, we have the Florida Panthers. Now, the Florida Panthers have been really strong. Fair play to Mark. I don't know what he's done for the Panthers. They've turned into one of the most established teams in the East in the last couple of years. Like, this is like IOL Panthers rising from the ashes. They started out the season against the New Jersey Devils, and they were absolutely brilliant. Like, yeah, Devils gave them 9 power plays, but they converted 3 of them, which is a 33% conversion rate. And they won the game 4-0. Minimal fuss. They never allowed the Devils a real opportunity to get into it. Then they went on the road to the Devils, but this was a whole different story. The Panthers' goaltending just fell to absolute shit this day, and I'm willing to ignore this result. Because I'd argue if your goaltending falls to shit, it shouldn't really be counted against you, because it's kind of like that in EHL. Flyers, they were good. Converting on a power play. I mean, they made hard work of a 3-0 lead, but they held on well to win this game. Nothing impressive, but it's the kind of result that happens when the team maybe not isn't at their best in a period. The Sabres are a weakened side, but I'll tell you what, this was a fun game again. The Panthers power play, one of their strongest assets, it appears this season, coming to the forefront. But just when you think they were going to get away with it, they came from 4-2 down, scored 2 goals, tied it up, lost in the shootout. But they outplayed a decent Sabres team. Not a great one, but a decent one. Then took on a Preds team who had started the season solidly, but, well, McDavid absolutely danced around all of them, and that was that. The 5-1 win flatters though, it's probably closer to a 3-1 or a 3-2 kind of game, but nice result nonetheless for the Panthers. And then they ravaged on the road to the Islanders, and they absolutely battered them. 52 shots on goal. I can't even fault that. That was a beautiful performance from the Panthers. So yeah, I think my explanation of the Panthers is good. They haven't shown enough to be a cup level team, but I place them in playoff level. They've looked really strong. I wouldn't say better than Boston because they haven't quite had that big flashy performance yet. Like, you could see the opening day of the season against New Jersey, but then you could also argue 9 power plays. I'm waiting for that big performance for them, and I want to see that on the road against Nashville when they win like 4-0. Then I'll say they're a cup level team, but right now, high level playoff team, and Panthers look strong at the start of the season. Next up, we've got the LA Kings. Now, yeah, so where do I put the LA Kings? I mean, you could say underperforming, but they just suck. Like, I mean, they were unlucky against Nashville not to get the regulation win. And yeah, they were very unlucky against the Hawks. So maybe, but then they got absolutely battered by Edmonton, and I mean they were unlucky against the Ducks, to be fair. So yeah, I'll put underperforming for the Kings. They haven't been as bad as I've maybe said they are, but I still don't think they're good. Anyway, there's going to be a slight delay in this recording because as I'm recording this, I'm waiting for a save. So I'll probably cut this bit out unless the save happens now. So I'll see you when we discuss the next bit. So we are back for the recording. This is how the colours here look. Cup level. Please do not abandon me. Okay. Playoff level, I've got high level Boston, followed by Panthers and the Oats, and then lower down you've got the Canes and the Avs. 8th seed Calgary, wildcard Oilers, we just don't know enough about them yet. Overperforming, Anaheim are doing better than they are, and in terms of performances, LA is underperforming. Columbus Blue Jackets are the Columbus Blue Jackets, and Dallas, Detroit, and Chicago all exist. Wild, I think their rankings should be fairly self-explanatory. They haven't really showed anything, although they had some tough games to start the season and then beat the Sharks, so I put them in the higher echelons if you exist, ahead of the Hawks, but not really see here. The Canadians are a team that could literally blow up at any moment, and I wouldn't be shocked because this is the Montreal Canadiens, but they are top of the East right now. They have only really played one difficult game though, and that was against the Bruins, and they lost that. Everything else has been kind of smooth sailing against weaker opposition. The next thing will be a bit more playing the Sabres. So I just think for the lack of quality opponents they play, but they have been getting the results. I'll put them lower playoff seed between the Avs and the Canes, because we know the Canes can win a big game. We know the Avs can. We don't really know about the Habs, but they did nearly beat Bruin, who I think are pretty good this year. Next up, we have the Nashville Predators. They have been a team who have surprised me on how good they've been. They beat Islanders, they beat the Wild, they lost to the Kings, which is fine. The last two games have been a 5-1 defeat to the Panthers and a 7-1 against New Jersey, so who knows where they are at. That 5-1 game against the Panthers, they were just not good. But then they beat the New Jersey Devils 7-1 in a game where the Devils' goaltending didn't exist, so I'm willing to throw that result out. Other than that, a shootout win against Tampa, which was a fairly even tie, and they blew a 3-0 lead. Beat an average Wild team, and they beat the Islanders 4-2 in a game which they dominated. So, Nashville, do I think they're playoff level off the back of these results? Probably not. They were destroyed by the Panthers. They were lucky to win against Tampa. That Tampa game could have gone either way. Wilders a nothing win. Islanders was nice. Devils was a fluke. I'll put them higher 8th seed. I think they're better than Calgary, but I don't think they've played as well as the Avs this season. New Jersey has been a hot mess and no one is discussing them. Although, I looked at them, most of their issues have been down to goaltending or giving away 9 fucking power plays. So, I've just got to put New Jersey in wildcard with the Oilers. I think the ceiling is higher than the Oilers, but we haven't really seen that consistency in play to really know where they are at. Now, moving on to the New York Islanders, they have got a couple of injuries right now. They started out the season losing to the Preds. We saw that game. It was brutal. We then saw them play very nicely to win on the road in Calgary. Then they went to the Habs, though, and they were kind of taught ice-hockey lesson. Their penalty kill disappeared. They didn't really show any form of team bonding, and they were just not good. They then beat the Sens 4-2 at home. The Sens are not good. They had their shots, but hey, quality wins at the end of the day. They then stayed at home. They hosted the Leafs in a good old clash. The Leafs were a better team, but neither team could score a power play to save their life. And it went to a shootout, and Islanders stole it. They only won this game due to goaltending. And then they played the Panthers. They were outclassed. They were nothing special. I think they're definitely in they exist category this year. I'll put them as the best at UXS because they did beat Calgary, and they looked decent playing up against the Habs to get 4 goals. And they also beat the Sens and the Leafs. In fact, where are they actually in the league right now? They are, yeah, I wouldn't say they're overperforming because like a 0.5 PCT isn't really great. So yeah, I'll put them in UXS. The Rangers have been a surprise package. Like, they've got 3 wins from 5, and no one really expected this. The Capitals, who we'll get onto later, they could get some interesting rankings. They played them. It was a close game. They just couldn't take advantage of the power play. And ultimately, it did cost them. They then played the Canucks at home. They were outclassed by a bad Canucks team. Then they beat Dallas 2-1 at home. Close game. They edged it. on the shots, and they edged it on the score. Late goal from Margaret sealed that deal. Philly is a team that's weakened a lot this year, but they still got the job done against them. They look pretty good there as well. We know the Oilers aren't great this year, but they played them and won just about. But the big concern that I have for the Rangers is, that god-awful power play, which has just been a fucking disappearing for some reason, it seems. Where do I think the Rangers are? I mean, they've looked good. I'll say that. The Rangers have looked solid to start the season. But, they did get outclassed by the Canucks. They haven't really had the most efficient power play at times. They only scored 2 goals against Dallas. The Oilers win is nice, but, yeah, I wouldn't say you exist. I'd say a lower wild card. It depends if they can keep this pace up. But, Ottawa have been fucking brutal. Like, I get losing 5-2 to the Sabres. But to lose in the way they did was brutal. They then got shut out by the Leafs, where again their power play was non-existent. That's been a big issue. 9% on the power play this season. Worst of anyone in the East. They then went back home and played the Habs. They should have won this game, but they didn't. The Habs had better goaltending. Then they travelled on the way to Pittsburgh. The performances were finally beginning to get there, but they were still not good. And they choked a 3-1 lead with 15 minutes to go. Then they went to New York against the Islanders, and they were arguably the slightly better team, but they just haven't had that ability to defend. And obviously the Jets are a very good team, and they actually matched the Jets, so I don't think the season has been a bad. They've had solid performances in their last 4 games, despite having lost all of them. So where would I put the Sens? I do think they're underperforming, and I think they have a better, higher ceiling than LA. I just think it's a time of giving Ottawa the time to get those results, and yeah, they'll be fine. Philadelphia, they have really fallen off this year. I know they made some moves, but I didn't expect them to fall off this hard. They started the season on the way to the Jets. The Jets did well. They brought the 2-0 lead to the Flyers, and that was a big blow. They then travelled back home to play Detroit. They were the better team. Detroit took advantage of the power plays, and they also had Koivunen, whereas Philadelphia doesn't. So immediate job for the Red Wings. They then played the Flyers, went 3-0 down, nearly pulled it back, but they were never good enough to get in this game. Went on the way to Detroit. They were a much better team that day, but couldn't take advantage of the power play, but still scored 5. And then obviously was the Rangers game, where they weren't really good. I do think they are definitely in the assist category this year. I think just because they were sort of on a par with Detroit in their games, I'll put them better because they look pretty good against them. But I don't think they're better than Dallas. Pittsburgh, man. Oh, I'm going to get flamed to my opinion on these lot. Although, to be fair, the last team they didn't have Orange, but you could also argue they need a backup goaltender. The only wins this season have been against absolute scrubs and the Canes. I just think right now, Pens are a lower playoff team. I think they're better than the Avs, but the Avs and the Pens, the 2 best teams in their conferences to start this season, they've not been good. And I think just based off what I've seen from other teams, I'm going to push Boston into cup level, below the mighty Sabres, all hail our Lord and Saviour. San Jose's ranking should be fairly self-explanatory. They're going in the UXist tier. Are they better than Blackhawks? Yeah. Any of these, I'd say UXist. Probably the Canucks. I put them below the Islanders. They've actually looked competent this year. Have the Canucks. That still doesn't mean they're good, but I think they're definitely in that kind of tier. St. Louis. Okay, well, where would I rank my own team? Well, we know the limitations of the Wild and the Hawks, but, they got the job done against the Wild. They looked pretty good for their opening day performance. They were outshot by Chicago, but still got the job done. They then travelled on the road to Calgary. They were the better team. They won the game. Then travelled on the road to San Jose. They were the better team. They got the win. And then they travelled on the road to the Yotes, played that. They weren't good. They lost the game. And the concern with the St. Louis Blues has been the power play, which has been a bit like the Rangers, non-existent. Nothing too special, but yeah, definitely playoff level. Do I think they're better than the Avs off the start of the season? No. But I'm going to put them in higher 8th seed. But the only reason I'm doing that is purely because we just haven't seen them play an actually informed team. But the next time when they play the Pens and the Avs, that ranking will either change dramatically up or dramatically down. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning. This team is the most frustrating team in the East. They have finished so close to a playoff spot the last 3 years, but it's just not happened. And they started the season well. They beat the Devils 4-2. They were outclassed though. I have no idea how they shithoused their way to that win. They were then put in their place by the Sabres. Nothing really to say there. Lost to Boston. Not going to touch on that one. They then went to overtime against Detroit. They were the better team. They deserved the win, but nothing special. Actually, they were pretty good. They then matched a decent Nashville team, but nothing special. Then played at home against the Sabres. Took 2 out of 3 penalty plays, and they were good. And then we're on the way to an informed Jets, and they just weren't good. But the power play has been something that's been really good for Tampa. 47% to start the season, the best of anyone in the East. The only one who gets close is Montreal and Florida. I mean, they lost to Nashville, so I can't really say they're an 8 seed, but I'd say they're a wild card. I think they've got a lesser seed than New Jersey and Edmonton, but there is definitely signs to suggest that if the Tampa make the right move or the right players get going, this team could do damage. Toronto, they played 5 games, won 3. They lost to the Habs, beat the Red Wings, beat the Sens, beat the Pens. That game against the Habs, they were out. Well, that's just rude, Mr. Also say. But against the Habs, they just never got into the game. They conceded 4 in like 9 minutes. There you can see in the second period, and it just kind of stopped them doing anything. You know, I mean, they did do a decent power kill, to be fair. Then obviously they played against the Red Wings. You know, the Red Wings are not that good, but Toronto had a really nice performance. Sens haven't been good, but we have mentioned they are underperforming. But the one that were good, they had nice goaltending, they took their chances, they won this game with minimal loss. Against the Pens, neither team was great, but the Leafs stuck it, and you've got to have games like that where both teams are not good, but you've got to get the win. Against the Islanders, they were a much better team, but their power play just couldn't hack it, and then we haven't seen them play since. But honestly, on those results, like, they were good against Detroit, Ottawa, and Pens, and you could argue they were unlucky to lose in the fashion they did against the Habs. And against the Islanders, that was definitely not a shootout loss. That's an overtime winner game. So honestly, I'm going to put Toronto higher than Calgary, less than Nashville, purely because I just think Nashville has shown ability, you know, with that call. Like, we know what Nashville have. They have Askew. You know, actually, to be fair, looking at their results, I'm going to change that. I'm going to switch Toronto and Nashville around, because Toronto look good. Now, next up, we have the Caps, the last team we'll look at from the East, because they have been a surprise package. In terms of why I keep seeing them pop up against good teams. They started out the season against the Avs. We know that was a nothing game, but they got the shootout loss. They then played against the Rangers, even game, got the over shootout win. They then played a very good Jets, by the way, who we obviously know are very good. They outshot the Jets, couldn't get it done. The Jets just had that goaltending advantage. Yeah, it's an average Canucks, but they still took them apart to win 6-3. Columbus Blue Jackets will not be used for any statistical analysis. And then they had their first kind of meh game, and even then they matched Calgary in a nice running back-to-back, but continuing the final minute of a game is not something I like in their team. But Caps have looked good. Like, they're on a similar level to Toronto, but I just don't think they've had that big win like Toronto. You know, Toronto beat the Pens, and that was kind of like their big statement win. The Caps have had 2 opportunities to do it against 3 opportunities to do it against the Avs, the Jets, and the Flames. They've lost all 3. But to be fair, they could have easily won any of those 3. So I'm actually going to drop the Caps from an 8th seed team down into the top tier of wildcard. In fact, I'm going to drop them into... Yeah, I think they've got a higher seeding than the Oilers off the start of the season for sure. I'm going to switch Oilers and Tampa around. Jets, I'm putting them at Cutler where they've been the best team at the start of the save. There is no question in my mind about that one. They have been phenomenal. Like, I don't think words can describe how good the Jets have been. Like, they've led up just 11 goals, and they've scored 23. They've got, like, a few power play issues, but they were fixed last season. The penalty kill is looking good. I have nothing about that. The Jets are just looking really solid. We'll see how this kind of tier list stacks up at the end of Sim 3. But right now, I think Jets and Bruins are leading the way in their conferences, with the Panthers, the Pens, the Hawks, not the Hawks, the Canes, and, yeah, those 3... Oh yeah, and the Habs. They're leading the way in the playoff levels at the East, whilst the Avs and the Yotes are there in the West. Nashville, Calgary, and St. Louis are sort of there in the West, with Leafs looking strong out the start of the East, with a couple of wildcard teams there, with the Rangers, the Tampa, the Caps, and the New Jersey, with Oilers in the wildcard here, and then UXS being the Islanders, the Canucks, Dallas, Philadelphia, Detroit, Wild, Sharks and Hawks. Anaheim is overperforming right now, whilst the Ottawa Sens and Kings are underperforming, and, well, Columbus Blue Jackets are there, so yeah. Thank you for watching if you make it here. This is going to be a fun series.